The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
On this week's Court TV podcast, a criminal scandal surrounding a prominent family of lawyers in the Lowcountry of South Carolina. They had money, power, and privilege until it began to unravel when Alec Murdaugh's wife Maggie and his son Paul were shot and killed on the family's sprawling hunting lodge. Now Alec is on trial for double murder, but is he a victim or is he a killer trying to cover up a long list of financial misdoings? Court TV's Chanley Painter joins me from Walterboro, South Carolina, as we dive deeper into this bizarre web of allegations.
This is the Court TV podcast with Vinnie Politan.
Welcome to the Court TV podcast. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for downloading. Thank you for listening. And wow, what a podcast we have here talking about the biggest trial taking place right now in the United States of America. And it's taking place in a very small community. I call this the big trial in the small town. It's Alec Murdaugh is his name. That's not how he spells it. He spells it A-L-E-X, but everyone calls him Alec. I don't know why, but they do. His last name is Murdaugh, but it's spelled M-U-R-D-A-U-G-H. So when I first started covering this, it was the Alex Murdaugh trial, but now it's the Alec Murdaugh trial. And give you a little background, this is a guy who was a very successful attorney making seven figures per year doing plaintiff's work, personal injury work. Someone gets, into an accident. Someone gets hit by a train. Someone is using a product that is defective and harms somebody. These are the types of cases that he has, and he's been making literally millions of dollars doing it. And he lives in this very rural country kind of town. Colleton County, Hampton County. Hampton County is where his law firm is. Colleton County is where his sprawling 1,700 acres are, where he hunts and he lives. He also has a beach house. He was married to his wife, Maggie. He had two children who were, they were grown up to a certain extent, Buster and Paul. So this is a guy who had it all. I mean, you're making seven figures in the Lowcountry of South Carolina, where he's living. You are a king. And he comes from Lowcountry royalty because his family, the Murdaugh family, for years, since 1910, when his great-grandfather founded the law firm, they've been controlling and really dominating the civil courts and the criminal courts of the Lowcountry because many of his father, his grandfather, great-grandfather were all solicitors, which are the local prosecutors in the Lowcountry. But down there, because there's just not that many people, not that much crime, you can be a prosecutor and you can also have your practice on the side. So you control the criminal courts and you are literally controlling the civil courts as the biggest plaintiff's firm, winning big cases and just making these big companies and corporations bow down and settle for large amounts. So that's who's on trial. And he's accused of murdering his wife and his son. His wife, Maggie, his son, Paul, by shooting them both with two different guns on the same night, taking a shotgun and blasting his son's brains so they splattered all over the dog kennel on their property, and then hunting down his wife as she tried to run away and shooting her several times with an AR-styled blackout rifle. Wow. There's a lot to this case. So I've been down there and covering this for us from the time of the crime. Is Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter, who joins us right now from the Lowcountry. Chanley, how are you?
Hey, Vinny, great to be with you. What a story. What a trial.
So let's just start here and describe the scene at the courthouse. I tried to give folks a little bit of background about what the case is about, But what is the story inside this courthouse and this courtroom?
Well, let's start outside the courthouse. First of all, it's a picturesque, historic courthouse here in downtown Walterboro, a town of around 5,400 people in Colleton County. And it looks today, I'm looking at it as I'm talking to you, nothing like it usually does, right? It's surrounded by media from all over the nation. It is tent city. There are barricades blocking off where the media can be, where the public can be, where the line will form outside the courthouse, which it does every day, every morning as this trial goes on. The line is getting longer. There's a certain number of seats inside the courtroom. Those are taken every day, the full amount. And then inside, it's a large courtroom. I know you've been in there, Vinnie. It is one of the larger courtrooms that we've been in for Court TV, 12 rows in the gallery. And so we have the public, we have the Murdaugh family in there sitting behind Alec Murdaugh. We have a lot of the investigators also sitting there on the prosecution side. And interestingly, a lot of the witnesses hang out inside the courtroom, which we don't see often. But it is something to behold, and it just continues to grow here as this case rolls on.
And you talk about lines. You know, we're used to lines being when there's a big trial, like in Los Angeles or in another city. But to have a long line at a courthouse in Colleton County, South Carolina, to me it speaks volumes about this case, this story. So this is about the ultimate betrayal, and it's a very layered story. But I want to start here. Because on the night of the murders, Alec Murdaugh is the one who calls 911 from his property to report that his wife and son have been shot. And he's interviewed by police. So let's listen to a little bit of this, because this is Alec's story of what he says he knows about the night that his wife and son were shot.
I mean, I pulled up and I could see him, and, you know, I knew something was bad. I ran out. I knew it was really bad. My boy over there, I could see it was...
Sorry.
And I could see his brain on and I ran over to Maggie, and actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first. You know, I tried to turn him over, and I don't know, I figured it out. His cell phone popped out of his pocket. I started to try to do something with it, thinking maybe, but then I put it back down really quickly. Then I went to my wife, and I mean, I could see.
Did you touch Maggie at all?
I did. I touched them both.
Okay.
I tried to take, I tried to do it as limited as possible, but I tried to take their pulse on both of them.
All right, there it is. I tried to take the pulse on both of them. This is it's been described as an extremely bloody scene. So, Chanley, if you could describe for us what the scene was like, and then how Alec appeared that night, what he looked like, what he was wearing, that sort of information.
Yeah, so the jury has watched the initial police responder arrive to the scene. They watched his body cam. It was the very first thing they watched on day one of testimony. And you can clearly see Alec Murdaugh. He's at the far end of the crime scene. So this officer has to kind of park almost in the middle of the crime scene and then walks through it past the bodies to Alec Murdaugh, who's on the far end, closer to where the residents would be at the home. And he's wearing a white t-shirt. He has on some cargo shorts, tennis shoes, and he's agitated. He's fidgety. He's immediately saying, "Are they dead? I just got here. I just got home." And you can see the anxiousness, and of course hear the anxiousness in his voice as well. He's asking if they're dead, if that's been confirmed. And he immediately mentions the boat crash too, which is also interesting, Vinnie. He seems to mention that at every opportunity.
And the boat crash is his son Paul got into a a boat crash, and he was allegedly steering the boat. It killed a young woman named Mallory Beach, and Alec was being sued. Paul was being sued and also being prosecuted criminally. And it was a big, big deal down there. Before this murder, it was like a huge story that the Murdaugh son was going to be criminally charged for driving steering a boat while under the influence. And now that he's been shot and killed, the criminal case goes away, but the civil case still pending. And I guess initially a lot of people down in the Lowcountry thought that someone was out to get the Murdaugh family, sort of revenge for that boat crash, but all those folks were cleared by investigators pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So what is Alec's story? Because he doesn't really have blood on him, right? Which is strange, right? You come upon two bodies of the two most important people in your life, and they're on the ground and they're all covered in blood. And he was very careful, he said, not to disturb the scene.
Yeah, that was a consistent theme of questioning that all of the officers testified to, that his clothing appeared clean, almost too clean, if he indeed went over to check for the pulses of Maggie and Paul, even trying to turn Paul over at one point or picking up his cell phone and putting it back. The evidence on him and at the scene really doesn't jive with his story, according to those officers who were there. And he has basically told, so far, we haven't heard a third interview yet of him, but that he was at the house earlier in the evening. He left work early that day so that he could be with Paul, who was at the farm. And they drove around, according to Alec Murdaugh, for a couple of hours looking at the trees and the sunflower field that apparently was dying. And then Maggie arrived around dinner time. They had dinner, but Alec then goes and watches TV after dinner and falls asleep. He assumes that Maggie and Paul go to the kennels, because Maggie loves to go to the kennels and be with the dogs there. And then he wakes up from this nap, Vinnie, and he needs to go check on his mother because it is the first night that she's without his father, who was just put in hospice that day, is what he says. He tries to call and text Maggie, no response, but goes to mom's house, comes back, no one's home. That's when he drives to the kennels and finds the bodies.
So Alec's story is that he's with the victims. They go to the kennels. He's watching TV. He falls asleep. He wakes up and he's going to go visit his mom, who's about 18 minutes away. We've both taken that drive from the property to his mom's house, which is 18 minutes away. And again, it's the kennels aren't right next to the house, so you can exit the house without going past the kennels. So he texts Maggie and then takes the drive to his mom's, hangs out there, comes back, finds the bodies. So the timeline here is very, very significant. Now, this was his initial story, and the jury has heard it, but the jury has also heard the audio and seen a piece of video, because Paul, before he's shot and killed, is taking video of one of the dogs that he's caring for. And in the background, we hear 3 voices at the kennels. Let's listen.
Get back. Get back. Quit, Cash. Come. Quit. It's okay. Come here. It's not that bad. Come here, Cash. Come here. Post it. Cash.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth. Bubba.
Hey, Bubba.
That's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Come here, Bubba.
Come here, Cash.
Come here, Bubba.
Cash. Quit.
Come here, Bubba. Come here, Bubba. That is the voice that is Alec Murdaugh in the background at the kennels. So, Chanley, put this into the timeline for us. When is this recording made? When do prosecutors suspect the murders took place?
Vinnie, this is huge. This blows a hole in what we just talked about, his alibi. There's no way he can be napping at the residence several yards away on this big property and also be heard in a video at 8:44 to 8:45 p.m. minutes before prosecutors say the murders happened. Like within 3 minutes, Vinnie, is what they said in opening statements. And you can clearly hear Alec Murdaugh's voice. So far, this jury has heard from 2 witnesses who say 1,000% that is Alec Murdaugh's voice. They'll probably hear from more witnesses who confirm it is his voice in that video. But not only that, Paul Murdaugh was on the phone with his friend minutes before this video was made, and his friend on the witness stand also said in that phone call, 4-minute phone call, I could clearly hear Alec Murdaugh's voice before this video was made too. So he was there for a while.
And how do prosecutors deduce that the time of the murders is about 3 minutes after this?
You know, this is really the fascinating part of this case, how your cell phone, Vinnie, can literally track almost every move you make. It's kind of scary to think about, but that's what helps the prosecutors narrow in on this time of death, because soon after Paul makes this video, they can see the messages that he's reading, text messages he's reading on his phone, and when his phone locks for the very last time, which is a 180 change of behavior, because he's always on his phone, always checking it. It has a low battery, he's on it so much. And same with Maggie's. Just about 30 seconds after Paul's phone locks for the very last time, Maggie's phone locks for the very last time, changing the behavior of her usage of the cell phone. And so that to prosecutors shows that they had to be dead within 3 to 4 minutes around 8:50 p.m. the night of June 7th, 2021.
That's amazing. That's amazing how they put those pieces together based upon cell phone usage. I mean, cases like this probably couldn't be prosecuted without cell phone evidence.
Mm-hmm.
If this took place 20 years prior, 25 years prior, we would have none of this. And it would be more about what eyewitnesses saw and approximate times. Here, things get much more exact. And for Alec Murdaugh, the timeline is so significant. Every single minute counts when you're talking about having the window of time to be able to commit this crime or make it impossible for him to commit this crime. So Chanley Painter is in the Lowcountry. We're going to continue talking about this. When we come back, we'll talk about not only that timeline and the window of time, and we'll hear from the first person to speak with Alec Murdaugh after the murders, but we'll also talk about what may be the prosecutor's most difficult thing to prove, which is a reason, a motive for this murder.
I will kill you, I will end you, and I will destroy you.
Someone they knew is back
I mean, you talk about high stakes, right?
with a brand new season,
This is how I'm going to die.
new crimes,
It was a brutal killing.
new cases
You ask yourself, why?
committed by those closest to the victim.
They seemed happy.
Someone They Knew with Tamron Hall. New season premieres February 19th.
Only on Court TV.
What did he say?
He just said that he was at the house for 30 to 40 minutes. I said,
You said what? Was he there 30 or 40 minutes that night?
not to my recall,
Why are you crying, Miss Smith?
because they're a good family, and I love working there. And I'm sorry all this happened.
That is Shelley Smith. She is the caregiver for Alec Murdaugh's mother, Libby, who suffers from dementia and needed care around the clock. So she was working an 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. shift like she always did regularly. And there she is describing a conversation with Alec Murdaugh. And this is a conversation that took place several days after the murders, where Alec Murdaugh is telling Shelley Smith that he was with her and with his mother for 30 or 40 minutes the night of the murders. He's telling her how long he was there, because this is where he went. When he said he woke up from that nap and left his property, he went to his mother's house. His mother can't testify. She has dementia, but her caregiver can and did testify, Shelley Smith. And this is a woman on the witness stand. Wow. You could tell how much all this has really impacted her. But she is telling this jury that Alec Murdaugh is telling her a few days later that she's there, that he was there for 30 to 40 minutes on the night of the murders. Like I said, every single minute counts when it comes to the alibi and the amount of time that the prosecution needs to account for to make it possible for Alec Murdaugh to have committed these murders. So let's bring back in Chanley Painter in the Lowcountry. Alec Murdaugh telling Shelley he was there 30 to 40 minutes, but what did she tell the jury about how long he was actually there?
Yeah, Vinny, that was probably the strongest part of her testimony, what you just played, because she had testified that he was there in total maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And that includes the time that he calls suddenly, unusually, late at night, arriving at his mom's home. He's outside. It takes her about 5 minutes to let him in. And then he stays there for maybe 15 more minutes before going home. He does visit his mother, holds her hand, lays down on the bed with her, but he's on his phone much of the time. She describes him as sort of fidgety while he's there, a little bit distracted, and then he leaves. And
it's kind of bizarre because the sun set at 8:29 that night, so it's already dark. I've been to the Lowcountry, Chanley. You've been staying there. You go to a restaurant at 8:30 at night, the place is empty. Like it's really small town America. You know, when the sun sets, you roll up the sidewalks, if there are sidewalks, but nobody's out. You know, you don't go out at 9 o'clock at night. And why would you visit your mom who's suffering from dementia at 9:30 at night? You know, and she's sleeping, right? She's even sleeping.
She's sleeping. There's a game show playing in her room where Shelley is. And the reason that she says Alec Murdaugh gave her for being there is because it is the day that his father goes to hospice. So he wants to check in on his mother. So it is sort of an unusual circumstance that he would want to make sure to go check on mom the first night alone. But other than that, her testimony was like, this was highly unusual for Alec Murdaugh, even though of his siblings, he was the one to visit the most, Vinny.
Yeah, that's true. That is 1,000% true. But the timing of all of it is really, really strange. And you'd think maybe he'd visit his father instead, who had just been put into hospice. But maybe it's past visiting hours. I don't know. But a lot of this is very, very confusing and murky. But that brings us back now to really one of the ultimate questions in this case, and I think the most difficult for prosecutors to answer, even though legally they have no requirement to do so, which is to explain to the jury why. And motive is not an element of the crime here. It's not anything that needs to be proven beyond any and all reasonable doubt, but it is something like you and I, both former prosecutors, sometimes need to explain to a jury, especially in a case like this where a man is accused of blowing his son's brains out, literally splattering them all over a dog kennel, and then hunting down his wife and the mother of his children. I mean, those are some bizarre behavior, outrageous behavior, cold, sociopathic type of stuff we're talking about here. So generally speaking, how would you describe what the motive is here? Before we get, and we'll listen to some of the testimony related to it, how would you describe what prosecutors are saying here?
So according to Creighton Waters, the prosecutor's opening statement, he couldn't go into a lot of detail because the judge hadn't allowed in the financial allegations as part of this case, but he did give a preview in that he said the perfect storm was brewing in Alec Murdaugh's life on June 7th, 2021. And what he was referring to is what now the jury is allowed to hear, and that is the fact that Alec Murdaugh's decades of stealing from his law firm, from his client, fake accounts, trafficking, laundering, had caught up with him. His financial house of cards was crumbling in, and it was coming from all different directions. Not only his law firm had uncovered and confronted him the day of the murders, Vinny, with almost $800,000 missing, but also he was under intense pressure from the civil suit related to that boat crash that you talked about earlier, that they were wanting to compel his finances. He had a hearing in just a few days concerning that. All of that was coming to a head on that date, and to delay, distract, save himself. According to prosecutors, he went to the extreme of murdering his wife and son to distract, make himself look like a victim. Basically, he's the victim now. Don't come at me with the financial stuff.
Right. And you know, folks in the Lowcountry are good people. So at a time where a man has just lost his wife and his son to a brutal crime, and he may be the next target, of course, you're not going to say, "Hey, where's the money, Alec?" Nobody's going to do that. No judge is going to push you to, open up the books on your personal finances.
And it worked.
And it absolutely worked.
It worked for a while.
It really did. It bought him time. It did buy him time. So let's listen to some of these misdeeds, and then we'll go into the backstories of each. But we begin with a young man who testified about the death of his mother and a lawsuit, and Alec Murdaugh. Take a listen.
After she passed, did you have any conversation with Alec about what to do about it?
I did.
And what was the conversation you had with Alec? What did he say? Go ahead.
I barely remember, but it was like, let me go after my insurance company for this or whatever, kind of get these medical bills and stuff paid.
Okay. So he said he was going to go after his insurance company?
Yes.
And get medical bills for your mom paid?
Yes.
Did he say he might get any of that money for you and your brother?
Yes.
Did you ever get 1 cent from Alec Murdaugh when he was still, before all of this happened?
No.
And it took, after this happening, and it took a legal process for that to happen, is that right?
Yes.
And ultimately, is it your understanding that he confessed judgment to taking money for both of those, is that right?
Okay, now the rest of the story. Chanley Painter. This involves the death of the Murdaugh's housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, who was more than a housekeeper. She raised Paul and Buster Murdaugh, the 2 kids. Mm-hmm. She was there day in and day out. What happened here?
Yeah, what a tragic story. Gloria Satterfield worked for Alec Murdaugh for nearly 25 years, like you said. And she tragically, in 2018, fell down the front steps of the Moselle home, not far from the crime scene, and hit her head. She died a few weeks later at the hospital. And Alec Murdaugh approached her son saying, "Sue me. I'm going to connect you with my friend over here who was going to sue me, and I'll promise you both each about $100,000. Well, according to the testimony, which he was such a strong witness in inside the courtroom, that was outside the jury's presence, but now he's going to testify in front of the jury at some point, Vinnie. He talks about how Alec Murdaugh duped him, lied to him, and never told him about a massive multi-million-dollar settlement that he received on his mother's estate. Instead, Alec Murdaugh pocketed it as his own.
That's unbelievable.
To have someone do that to someone that, practically was a family member for 25 years, do that to her family, how is that going to play before this jury?
Another case of betrayal. And this is what the prosecutors need to convince this jury, that this guy will betray anyone. And the ultimate betrayal, killing your own flesh and blood. Now, so Gloria, I just want to recap this for everyone so they understand. Gloria Satterfield falls in Alec Murdaugh's home. Alec Murdaugh then profits from that. She slips and falls in his house and dies, and he ends up with millions of dollars in his pocket because he hooked up the Satterfield family with his friend, and he and his friend take all the money, give nothing to the kids, and unbelievably, this guy, she died on your front steps, and you make millions. Unbelievable. Now, let's get to the next one. And this is probably the most closely related to the murders in terms of time, because earlier during the day, Alec Murdaugh was at work and was confronted by an accountant about some missing money, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's listen.
Randy immediately conceded that we needed to talk to Alec, that it looked like he had stolen.
What's the total amount?
$2,841,512.55. And it is my understanding that Alec admitted it and that it was determined he would resign.
Yikes. So that's a little bit after. The initial confrontation, the day of the murder, is for the $792,000. Give us a little bit of the backstory of that, and then we'll get into what she just mentioned, because that's also a very significant moment.
It really is. This is just hours before the murders, Vinnie, where the CFO, Jeannie Seckinger, goes upstairs to confront Alec Murdaugh. This has been ongoing since about May, about a month or so. They've had this weird check issue in the office concerning Alec Murdaugh. So she goes up and confronts him. He's leaning against a file cabinet. She says, gives her a dirty look. Like, what do you want now? Why are you bothering me now? And she says, let's go into your office. They close the door. And she says, I have reason to believe that you stole $792,000, pocketed it yourself instead of giving it to the law firm as it was supposed to go. And of course, she says, Alec Murdaugh immediately says, oh, well, that's a mistake. I can explain it. It's in this other attorney's trust account. We got it covered. Don't worry. And then she says that they immediately got a phone call, or Alec Murdaugh did, about his father being in hospice. So she turns from, confronter to friend. The conversation immediately changes. She lets it go. And she believes that he immediately goes home, which we learn later he doesn't. But that's how that confrontation goes. And remember also, Vinnie, when he's telling police what he did that day, he never happened to mention that he went home early because he was confronted at his law firm or that his dad was in the hospital. It was because Paul was home. He just wanted to spend time with Paul. So there's another discrepancy in his story. Yeah,
it doesn't make you think you would remember these things. Like a big thing, like your father going to hospice. That's a reason to leave work. Being confronted by the accountant about $800 or almost $800,000 in funds that did not make its way to the law firm, but instead went directly to Alec Murdaugh. A big event. But what's interesting there is that as soon as the pressure is on him about the money, that phone call diverts the attention. Mm-hmm. And that's I would almost argue to the jury, that's where the idea is planted in his head that, okay, that took the pressure off. I need to take more pressure off.
Yeah.
My wife and son are murdered. That'll clearly take everyone off of the track. Well, what we just heard, the testimony that we heard, involved his resignation from the firm, which takes place a little bit later. So when we come back, we're gonna talk about what also happened at that time. And again, this is a big moment, right? He's been asked to resign from the law firm for stealing more than $2 million. And guess what, folks? There's another shooting.
For more Court TV, watch it on cable, over the air, Roku, or go to CourtTV.com and stream live gavel-to-gavel coverage. Catch up on the big moments from our current cases and relive some of Court TV's most historic trials. Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
I got a flat tire, and I stopped. And somebody stopped to help me, and when I turned my back, they tried to shoot me.
Oh, okay. Were you shot?
Yes, but I mean, I'm okay.
You shot where? Where were you shot at?
Huh?
Did they actually shoot you, or they tried to shoot you?
They shot me, but...
okay, wait, you need EMS?
Well, I mean, yes, I can't drive.
Okay.
And I'm bleeding a lot.
Where part of your body?
I'm not sure. Somewhere on my head.
Your head?
Somebody just stopped for me, ma'am.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Another financial problem. He's confronted about $2 million. He's got to resign. And then all of a sudden, on the side of the road, Chanley, on the side of the road, I've been to that spot. You've been to that spot. There's nothing there. It's just this long straightaway with a little church with a red roof and a little house next to it, but no people. And somebody decides they're going to shoot Alec Murdaugh in the head. And when he calls 911, he starts telling them about his flat tire. Not like, hey, I've been shot in the head. Send me help.
Right. I can kind of sense the 911 dispatcher a little incredulous too, just the tone of her voice re-listening to that. But yes, I've been on that road, Vinnie. We were there quite a while. I'm sure you were as well. Maybe one car passed by us the whole time that we were there on that small county road. Very, It's just, the jury may get to hear about this, and that will be huge if they get to hear about this.
So who shot him? Who shot Alec Murdaugh in the head on the side of the road? What's the story behind that?
Cousin Eddie. So Curtis Eddie Smith, who's actually a distant cousin of Alec Murdaugh, is subpoenaed to testify in this case. And he's the one that is alleged to have met Alec Murdaugh there on the side of the road. He was called there by Murdaugh, allegedly asked him to shoot him. He wanted to commit suicide, is how it goes. And the story's changed a couple of times, according to Curtis Eddie Smith. Whether there was a tussle over the gun or whether he actually did shoot him, we don't know, but maybe he'll tell us if he testifies in this trial.
It's a bizarre story because at first it's like, okay, well, now Alec Murdaugh and his family are clearly the targets of someone who's out to get and eliminate the whole family. That's what it looked like when I first heard it.
Mm-hmm.
Then they investigated and he said, no, I set it up with Cousin Eddie, or allegedly he said this, I set it up with Cousin Eddie to shoot me to make it look like I got shot so my other son, my surviving son, Buster, could get the $10 million in insurance money. And I don't know what Cousin Eddie is going to say. He and Cousin Eddie have a strange relationship, right? It's not just like distant cousin, but financial former client, and some financial dealings as well.
Yes. So Cousin Eddie also faces some of the same charges as Alec Murdaugh. He's accused of running a drug trafficking ring. He was the drug dealer of Alec Murdaugh, allegedly. He was also, of course, helping him launder all the stolen money from his clients and law firms, more than $2 million. So he's facing indictments and charges on that, along with Alec Murdaugh. And he's supposed to testify in this case, possibly about this roadside shooting and being a part of this financial scams that Alec Murdaugh was running.
Yeah, I think if the jury hears about this roadside shooting, they take a whole different look at Alec Murdaugh. Now, I think he'll paint it as he was distraught. He had lost his wife and his son. He was depressed and he just wanted to die and make sure that his son would be taken care of because he knew all of these financial problems and lawsuits and everything, that he wasn't going to have a dime for his son Buster, and he just loves his family so much. I get what their story is going to be, but this is wacky. This is wacky, and it's very coincidental that 3 people in his family get shot, but only one of them survives. Right? He survives this somehow.
Right. Right.
I don't even know how this happened. Like, how do you get shot in the head and not killed?
Yeah.
Like, it has to be a freak accident or like very well orchestrated.
And that's an issue in and of itself, because remember when this happened and we were all shocked, oh, someone's coming after Alec Murdaugh, and then we find out it's big staged suicide attempt, and then everyone's arrested, and then he's in court just a few days later, and there's not, did you see the back? I didn't see any bandage, anything. His hair wasn't even shaved. It was all, I don't know what happened. We don't know what happened.
He recovered very quickly from the gunshot to the head. There was blood though. He did actually get shot. No one's saying he didn't get shot, but he amazingly survived this. Cousin Eddie, to me, that's going to be an incredible moment when and if he takes the stand, because I think there's a chance that the defense may try to paint him as someone who could have committed the double murder.
Yeah. In fact, they've already accused him in the court documents before this trial, Vinny. There's an issue that apparently Cousin Eddie failed a polygraph test when asked about being at the crime scene at the time of the murders. And you and I know that polygraph, they aren't admissible in court, but they have a motion that the judge has not decided on yet on whether or not the defense can cross-examine him about his failed polygraph. We're going to hear about that. But it's also being reported by Fitz News that Curtis Eddie Smith is expected to testify that at this roadside debacle, Alec Murdaugh confessed to him that he murdered his wife and his son.
Wow.
And that was a part of the reason why he wanted Curtis Eddie Smith to shoot him and kill him.
Wow. That's powerful. But again, we say Cousin Eddie is a character. He is a character.
Yes. He has some credibility issues.
Credibility is very much at risk here. And I could see the defense. Yeah, and here, you look at what really, really happened. Like, there were 2 guns that were used that day. So the defense has been saying, 2 shooters. Well, I could see the jury saying, oh, yeah, well, maybe Cousin Eddie is the second shooter along with Alec.
Very possible.
So, but it becomes problematic for prosecutors because anytime you as a prosecutor put a witness on the stand and the jury doesn't believe him, it's not your fault, but if they don't believe that witness, it doesn't help you. And you have that burden beyond a reasonable doubt. If the jury thinks there's something funny going on with one or more of your witnesses, they hold it against you. They can hold it against you, and that can be the foundation for a reasonable doubt in the case. That's what makes him such an important but very unpredictable witness. And I will really be looking forward to seeing and hearing his testimony and seeing how he holds up on cross-examination and what direction the defense goes and what the prosecution asks him about and what he's actually going to say this time. Because again, folks, we call him Cousin Eddie for a reason. For a reason. All right, Chanley Painter in the Lowcountry of South Carolina. I know you've got a busy day ahead. You had a quick break from the courtroom, so you helped us out here. We appreciate that. We were broadcasting from Fat Jack's, so if you see Fat Jack down there, give my regards.
I will.
We'll be back down for the end of the case.
Everyone misses you.
We'll be back down for the end of the case whenever that is, as it looks like the trial is going to take a little bit longer than originally scheduled. So, Chanley Painter, thank you so much.
Thanks, Vinnie.
All right, folks, that is it for this podcast, but you can watch the trial, and our coverage begins at 8 a.m. on Court TV. 8 a.m. every morning, our coverage begins. Then you can watch my show 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., where we have the big moments, the big interviews, and analysis of everything that's happening inside that courtroom each and every day. Of course, you can check the show notes for links. If you don't have Court TV, rescan your digital antenna. You can also go to courttv.com to find out where you can watch in your neighborhood. That's it for this week. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to courttv.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.